Don't you want a safe environment for your children? Don't you want to know that the food that you're feeding them is not filled with chemicals that are going to give them cancer and chronic disease? And don't you want a president that's going to make America healthy again?
Robert Kennedy Jr.'s endorsement of Donald Trump is best understood as a double-edged political sword. It may help the former president in battleground states, but the price could be high if it includes putting Mr. Kennedy in a second Trump administration.
Have you all negotiated over or talked about a cabinet position, another position within a Trump government, in exchange for your endorsement?
No. There's been no commitments. You know, I met with President Trump, with his family, with his closer advisors, and we just made a general commitment that we were going to work together.
Mr. Kennedy's remarks at the Trump rally in Glendale included a scathing attack on Democrats for the way they've treated him as a candidate.
We know that a government that can silence its opponents has license for any kind of atrocity. And can you think of any time that you can look back in history and say that the people who were censoring were the good guys? They're always the bad guys, because it's always the first step down that slippery slope to totalitarianism.
It's clear that Mr. Kennedy feels Democrats played dirty in trying to keep him and running mate Nicole Shanahan off state ballots and limit their reach on social media platforms. He also blamed the mainstream media for censorship, saying he could barely get onto any network except Fox.
When Ross Perot ran, in the 10 months that he ran, he had 34 appearances on the networks. I had 2 appearances in 16 months. I was blocked out from the networks. I was blocked out from the debate. I had no path to victory.
In that sense, Democrats can blame themselves for the endorsement, since Mr. Kennedy might have dropped out and not endorsed either candidate. It's hard to judge the endorsement's electoral impact. RFK Jr. has lost about half of his standing in the polls since President Biden dropped out of the race, and most of those voters seem to be disgruntled Democrats who are now returning home for Kamala Harris.
They installed a candidate who was so unpopular with voters that she dropped out in 2020 without winning a single delegate.
That means that the 5% or so of voters who continue to back him are probably more inclined to support Mr. Trump if they bother to vote at all. The Trump campaign argued in a memo that there are enough of these voters to make a decisive difference in states like Arizona and Georgia, where Mr. Biden won narrowly in 2020. In a close election, they may be right.
He said he didn't want any more $200 billion wars in Ukraine, that we could use that money back here in the United States.
RFK Jr. hits some populist notes that Mr. Trump also supports, such as skepticism about the war in Ukraine and opposition to tech platform censorship. But the former Democrat lives in the fever swamps with his anti-vaccination views, his support for an extreme climate agenda, and his belief that American health ills are largely the result of collusion between big business and government regulators.
And don't you want the chemicals out of our food? And don't you want the regulatory agencies to be free from corporate corruption? And that's what President Trump told me that he wanted. He also told me that he wanted to end the grip of the neocons on U.S. foreign policy.
Mr. Kennedy is also the guy who recently admitted to dumping a dead bear in New York's Central Park.
And that woman in a van in front of me hit a bear and killed it. A young bear. So I pulled over and I picked up the bear and put him in the back of my van because I was going to skin the bear.
Mr. Kennedy described the incident, which happened more than a decade ago, to Roseanne Barr in a video posted on social media.
I had an old bike in my car that somebody had asked me to get rid of it. I said, let's go put the bear in Central Park and we'll make it look like he got hit by a bike. It'll be funny for people.
The day after the video was published and the bear story was detailed in a New Yorker article.
Wall Street Journal has this. They say it's a double-edged sword, essentially, that it may help President Trump to pick up some of your followers if they're willing to go over there. But they warn about what you would do in his administration. They say this: RFK Jr., if he's anywhere near the healthcare or environmental agencies in a Trump administration, look out. Mr. Trump's best response is to thank RFK Jr. for his support, make no promises about the future, and by all means avoid joint campaign appearances. You've already had one. Will you have others? Will you campaign for President Trump?
I'm going to be campaigning actively. I think President Trump is going to make a series of announcements about other Democrats who are joining his campaign. And I want to make America healthy again, and so does President Trump.